You're about to uncover the darkest secrets of our ancient relatives, secrets that will shatter your view of human history forever. But before we dive in, I need you to take action right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who thinks they know everything about evolution. Because what you're about to learn about Neanderthals will haunt your dreams and spark endless debates. Don't just watch, engage, comment below with your thoughts, and let's build a community uncovering humanity's hidden horrors. Ready? Let's expose the truth. They ate their own children. And it gets so much worse than that. What archaeologists discovered in caves across Europe reveals that our closest extinct relatives weren't just occasional cannibals. They were systematic, methodical, and absolutely terrifying in ways that will change how you see human nature forever. Deep beneath the rolling hills of Belgium, the Goyet caves had kept their secrets for millennia. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. When archaeologists first descended into these limestone chambers in the 1990s, they thought they were looking at animal bones. It took them months to realize they were actually staring at the remains of an ancient family dinner where the main course was Neanderthal children. The bones were everywhere. Scattered across 20 square meters of cave floor lay the remains of at least 5 Neanderthals, 4 adults and 1 child. Their skeletons smashed to pieces. But these weren't the remains of some ancient tragedy. The fracture patterns told a different story entirely. Every single long bone had been systematically cracked open. The skulls showed precise cut marks around the temples and jaw. Someone had been very deliberately extracting every scrap of edible tissue from these bodies. Think about the last time you carved a Thanksgiving turkey. Now imagine doing that to a human teenager. Dr. Helene Rougier ran her fingers along the microscopic scratches etched into the thigh bone. Parallel grooves that told an unmistakable story. Someone had used stone knives to strip every last bit of meat from this child's bones, with the same methodical precision you'd use on any dinner. She had seen identical marks on the deer and horse bones scattered throughout the same cave layer. The Neanderthals had processed these human remains exactly like any other food source. But here's where this story gets truly terrifying. What if I told you that Belgium was just the tip of the iceberg? As archaeologists started connecting the dots across Europe, they realized they weren't looking at random acts of cannibalism. They were looking at something much worse, a systematic, almost industrial approach to eating human beings. At Mooligari in France, researchers discovered the remains of 6 Neanderthals that had been systematically dismembered. Stone tools had filleted the chewing muscles from 2 young skulls. Someone had sliced out at least 1 tongue. The precision was surgical. These weren't frenzied attacks, but careful food preparation. Now, brace yourself for this next part, because what archaeologists discovered next proves these Neanderthals weren't just desperate cannibals. They were experts. The cut marks followed a specific sequence that would make a modern butcher jealous. First, stone knives separated joints with surgical precision and removed large muscle groups from the arms and legs. Then came the delicate work around the skull, cutting away the temporalis muscles that powered the jaw, carving out the tongue, accessing the brain case. Finally, heavy stones smashed open the long bones to reach the fatty marrow inside. Okay, I thought I'd seen the worst of it. But what archaeologists found next made my blood run cold, and it should make yours too. These Neanderthals didn't just eat their dead, they turned their bones into tools. Imagine using your grandmother's femur as a hammer. That's exactly what they did. Femur fragments became hammers to sharpen stone blades. Skull pieces served as anvils. The dead weren't just food, they were equipment. I want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine the worst winter of your life. Now multiply that by 1,000. Picture this. 45,000 years ago, trapped in the Goyet caves, a Neanderthal family is facing their final choice. watch their children starve to death or make a decision that would haunt us 45,000 years later. Outside, an endless winter gripped northern Europe. Ice sheets stretched to the horizon, and temperatures plummeted far below anything modern humans have experienced. Game animals had fled south or died off. Plant foods lay buried under feet of snow. For the Neanderthal band sheltering in these limestone chambers, starvation was a constant companion. When the first member of their group succumbed, perhaps an elderly grandmother or a sick child, a terrible decision had to be made. The body represented perhaps 50 pounds of protein and fat. It could keep the rest of the group alive for days, maybe weeks. In a world where death waited around every corner, wasting such a resource would have been unthinkable. The butchering began immediately before decomposition could set in. Stone knives made quick work of the major muscle groups. The brain, rich in essential fats, was carefully extracted through the skull base. Even the bone marrow, packed with calories and nutrients, was harvested by systematically smashing every long bone into fragments. This wasn't mindless savagery. The Neanderthals approached human butchery with this same methodical efficiency they brought to processing deer or horses. They knew anatomy intimately, where to cut to access the richest tissues, how to extract maximum nutrition from every part of the body. This was survival cannibalism at its most calculated and desperate. Just when you think you understand these Neanderthals, they throw you a curveball that changes everything. What if I told you some of them weren't eating people because they were hungry? What if they were doing it for a reason that's somehow even more disturbing than starvation? At Crapina cave in Croatia, archaeologists discovered something even more unsettling. For nearly 10,000 years, generation after generation of Neanderthals had brought their dead to the same cave. The bone modifications were remarkably consistent across millennia. The same cut marks in the same places, the same careful processing techniques. The skull modifications at Crapina were particularly puzzling. Unlike the desperate butchery at survival sites, these showed deliberate, ritualized patterns. Specific areas of the skull had been carefully carved away, but not in ways that maximized food extraction. Instead, the modifications seemed designed to remove flesh cleanly, perhaps to prepare the bones for some other purpose. Here's the part that will mess with your head. Some researchers think these Neanderthals were eating their dead not because they were hungry, but because they loved them. Think about that for a second. In their minds, consuming Grandma might have been the ultimate way to honor her memory and keep her spirit alive in the family. The careful, repeated nature of the bone modifications suggests cultural traditions passed down through generations. Perhaps eating their dead was how these Neanderthals honored their ancestors, ensuring they remained part of the living community even after death. The evidence from multiple sites paints a complex picture. Neanderthals weren't mindless brutes driven only by hunger. They had sophisticated cultural practices around death and burial. They cared for their sick and elderly. They buried their dead with grave goods and flowers. Yet, they also systematically cannibalized members of their own communities when circumstances demanded it. You know that phrase, waste not, want not? Well, Neanderthals took it to an absolutely horrifying extreme. And when you hear what they did with the bones after eating the meat, you'll understand why this discovery changed everything we thought we knew about human nature. At Goyet, 5 human bones showed clear evidence of being used as retouchers, tools for sharpening stone blades. A femur fragment became a hammer for knapping flint. Skull pieces served as anvils for shaping obsidian points. Even in death, these Neanderthals continued to serve their community as equipment for survival. This wasn't unique to Belgium. Across Europe, Neanderthal sites contained human bones that had been repurposed as tools after the meat was consumed. It represents a level of resource optimization that modern humans find deeply unsettling. Nothing was wasted. Every bone, every fragment had potential utility. The implications are staggering. These weren't desperate one-time events, but systematic practices with clear cultural protocols. Neanderthals had developed efficient techniques for processing human remains and established cultural norms around which bones made the best tools. They passed this knowledge down through generations, refining their methods over thousands of years. All right, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. And by elephant, I mean the absolutely mind-bending question that's probably been nagging at you this whole time. How do you convince an entire community that eating people is okay? Because somebody had to teach the kids how to do this. The remains at most sites represent complete family groups: men, women, children, infants. Someone had to make the decision to kill and eat these people. Someone had to wield the stone knives. Someone had to teach children how to process human bodies efficiently. The cannibalized remains show no evidence of warfare or violence preceding death. These weren't enemies captured in battle, but members of the same community. The victims were likely already dead from disease, accidents, or old age when the butchering began. But in some cases, the evidence suggests otherwise. Cut marks on several skulls indicate the victims were healthy when they died. No signs of illness or injury preceded the systematic dismemberment. This raises the terrifying possibility that some Neanderthals were killed specifically for food, that cannibalism wasn't always about disposing of the already dead, but about creating fresh meat when other resources ran out. The social dynamics required for sustained cannibalism are almost impossible for modern humans to comprehend. It would have required community consensus, established protocols, and the psychological ability to see fellow Neanderthals as potential food sources. Yet, the archaeological evidence makes clear this wasn't aberrant behavior, but part of their normal survival toolkit. As researchers examined more Neanderthal sites, cannibalism appeared across vast distances and time periods. From Spain to Belgium, from France to Croatia, the evidence mounted. This wasn't isolated to one population or one particularly harsh winter. It was a widespread cultural practice that persisted for tens of thousands of years. At El Sidrón in Spain, a family group of 12 Neanderthals, men, women, and children, had been systematically butchered and consumed. Cut marks covered their bones. Their skulls had been smashed open for brain extraction. Even the children's remains showed evidence of careful meat removal. The demographic pattern was telling. The cannibalized groups consistently included individuals of all ages, from infants to elderly adults. This wasn't selective killing of the weak or disabled. Entire family units had been processed for food, suggesting that whatever drove these episodes affected whole communities simultaneously. The geographic spread is equally revealing. Neanderthal cannibalism occurred in coastal regions with abundant marine resources and inland areas rich with game. It happened during mild interglacial periods and harsh ice ages. Climate and resource availability seem to have had little impact on the practice. This suggests cannibalism was deeply embedded in Neanderthal culture rather than being purely a response to environmental stress. The most recent evidence of Neanderthal cannibalism dates to just 40,000 years ago, right around the time modern humans were spreading across Europe. As our ancestors moved into Neanderthal territories, competition for resources intensified. The last Neanderthal populations may have turned to cannibalism more frequently as their world collapsed around them. The final Neanderthal communities were small, isolated, and struggling. Genetic evidence suggests their populations had crashed to dangerously low levels. Inbreeding was common. Birth defects increased. As their numbers dwindled and their territory shrank, perhaps cannibalism became an increasingly desperate survival strategy. But we'll never know if cannibalism contributed to their extinction or was simply a symptom of their decline. What we do know is that the practice accompanied them right to the end. The very last Neanderthals were still eating their dead when the final winter came. Modern humans struggle to comprehend Neanderthal cannibalism because it violates our deepest cultural taboos. We see it as the ultimate moral transgression, a complete breakdown of civilized behavior. But for Neanderthals, it may have been just another survival tool, no different from hunting mammoths or gathering plant foods. Their world was brutal beyond modern imagination. Life expectancy was perhaps 30 years. Most children died before reaching adulthood. Starvation, disease, and predation were constant threats. In such an environment, wasting potential food sources, even human ones, might have been the real moral failing. The evidence also reveals the sophistication of Neanderthal cognition. They weren't mindless brutes, but intelligent beings capable of complex decision-making and cultural transmission. They developed efficient butchery techniques and passed them down through generations. They created tools from human bones and established protocols around resource utilization. These behaviors required advanced planning, social cooperation, and cultural learning. Perhaps most importantly, Neanderthal cannibalism doesn't exist in isolation from their other behaviors. These same populations cared for disabled group members, buried their dead with flowers, created the first known jewelry, and may have developed rudimentary art. They were capable of both profound compassion and calculated brutality, much like modern humans. The difference may simply be that Neanderthals lived in a world where such choices were necessary for survival. When faced with starvation, they chose to live, even if it meant crossing moral boundaries that modern humans find unthinkable. In their desperate struggle for existence, nothing was off limits, not even the bodies of their own dead children. Here's the final haunting truth that will stick with you long after this ends. Those bone fragments scattered across cave floors throughout Europe aren't just evidence of cannibalism. They're a mirror. Because when you strip away civilization, when you remove all the safety nets we take for granted, we're all just a few missed meals away from making the same horrifying choices. They reveal a species pushed to its absolute limits, making choices that ensured some would live even as others became food. It's a dark mirror held up to human nature itself, showing us what we might become when civilization crumbles and only survival remains. In the end, the Neanderthals failed. Their small, scattered populations couldn't compete with the larger, more organized groups of modern humans spreading across Europe. But for over 300,000 years, they endured in one of the harshest environments Earth has ever known. And if eating their own dead was part of what kept them alive for so long, perhaps we shouldn't judge them too harshly for making the ultimate sacrifice. You've just witnessed the raw, unfiltered truth about our Neanderthal ancestors, a story of survival, ritual, and horror that challenges everything. But don't stop here. Take action now. Smash that like button if this blew your mind, subscribe for more mind-bending historical revelations, and share this with friends to spark a discussion on human nature. Comment below, would you have made the same choices? Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Let's uncover more together.